Welcome back, everyone. I have a great show planned for you tonight. We have Mike Matranga on Tactical Tequila podcast. Mike is a former U.S. Secret Service agent, former VLM special agent, former Texas City ISD security director, and owns and is the CEO of M6 Global. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Good to see you again.
Likewise. It's been a while.
It's been a while since I've seen you. We've texted.
Yeah.
But yes, it's been
A few years.
almost 5 years since I've seen you in person.
Yeah, I would say that's pretty accurate.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
You were about to have a baby the last time I saw you. I mean, not technically you, but your spouse at the time.
I mean,
it happens as we get older.
Right, it does. So tell us a little bit about your time in the Secret Service. You were on the counter assault team. Go ahead and dive in.
Yeah, so I started in the Houston field office with the United States Secret Service, and it's one of the greatest honors I've ever had. There's a lot of days that I get tired of talking about it, but it seems like that's all that most people want to talk about. And so I share my experiences there, but I will say that the Secret Service is what made me into not only the man that I am today, but also who I am today in regards to the security space. And I had the honor to work with some of the greatest men and women in the world, both within the United States Secret Service and then with other foreign elements that we would work with when we would travel overseas. And not only that, but even in the United States. And so getting back to the original question, I started in Houston, and then I went over in 2008 or 2007, technically, I went to work or was gracious enough, shall I say, to be assigned to is then Senator Barack Obama during the campaign detail, and then did that full campaign nominee operations detail for the full 18 months. We started picking him up May 3rd of 2007 and providing protection for him, due to intelligence, and then did that, and then came back to Houston for a while, and then was reassigned from the task force investigating counterfeit currency and white-collar crime over to protective intelligence cases, threats against the President of the United States. And quite frankly, that's what I love the most is I like the tactical stuff and the advanced work and all that, but I really like investigating threats, which is kind of what I'm doing now and helping people identify threats in people. But went over to the counter assault team, President's counter assault team in 2011. I did that for right at 5 years, and I became an assistant team leader there on Team 5 and Team 6. We have 8 teams total. For those that don't know the history of the United States Secret Service counter assault team, we started in 1979 with the help of Delta Force, and we remained very good allies and partners in training and whatnot. Then I went over to the presidential protective detail for just a little over a year, and then left and went out to the Bureau of Land Management, Department of Interior, where you and I met, and we were working together. You were assigned at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I was assigned to the Bundy case, the infamous Bundy case.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we'll get into that, but I was assigned to the Bundy case as one of the lead agents with another former Secret Service agent. We were responsible for the security of the government witnesses that we had, and there was about 80. And so, I think you and I can have some personal conversations about that trial and the things that we thought were wrong. And I'll be quite frank with you, I always knew that the U.S. government was going to lose that case for multiple reasons, and we can get into why. But I then found myself with you at the Security Operations Center the night of October 1st, 2017, with the infamous Mandalay Bay Route 91 Harvest Festival shooting, which was a tragic event. And I was assigned to the FBI's JTTF at that time, and so having been the lead agent for DOI and BLM for the Bundy trial at the time, we thought there was a nexus there because Stephen Paddock, the shooter in Las Vegas, was from the Mesquite area where the Bundys were from, and so that we thought there was a nexus there, and so that's why I was there. That's why you were there. I think that was the perfect example of all agencies coming together, working to coordinate and provide assistance at a magnitude that nobody had ever seen, with over 500 wounded and 57 deceased. And I say it all the time, Las Vegas Metro and those that were involved in the coordination of that event did a fantastic job. Were there things that probably could have done better? Yeah, but I think, given the scale, it was done pretty damn well. And so I left there, came to Texas. Unfortunately, February 14th of 2018, you had the Parkland shooting, and then just 3 months later, you had the tragic Santa Fe High School shooting, which is in my county. I had coffee with one of the victims' mothers today, who her and I are still working at the state of Texas to write some legislation, and took Texas City ISD to being ranked number one as one of the most progressive, proactive school security programs in the United States, just because we didn't solely focus on response. We focused on the proactive nature and preventative nature of security, doing it right. I written or helped draft and assist in drafting 2 bills at the state. And I'm now the national or the vice chairman of the National Council for School Safety Directors. M6 Global was founded in 2019, started working in 2020. I have 28 consultants in 15 states, and we help schools and universities and businesses and critical infrastructure conduct, very skilled and strategic planning for their security. So I know that was long-winded. I apologize. It was like a 10-minute intro, but I think your listeners will be okay with it, hopefully.
No, I'm fairly certain they will be. So going back to your Secret Service days on the counter assault team, did you ever have any close calls where you guys had to, react in order to, do your job as a counter assault team?
Well, I think without getting into any breaches of any NDAs that most of us sign when we leave, what I'll say is, just like anytime, anybody is in that position where there's a higher risk of threat to not only yourself, but to the world's most powerful man, you always have situations where maybe intel will dictate a different response. And I will tell you, as far as like direct combat action, the Secret Service counter assault team, luckily, knock on wood, has, though we've deployed to hostile territories in conjunction with other elite like military groups, SEALs, Rangers, Green Berets, the Secret Service counter assault team has not engaged outside of the July 13th assassination attempt. And that was one of our counterparts, the U.S. Secret Service counter sniper team, who did a fantastic job. Love to get into that at some point too. But I will tell you, there were times where we were overseas where we had to pivot and adjust and make decisions on the fly. I can recall an instance where I won't say what country, but in the Middle East, where roadside bombs were discovered with a former president. No need to say which one. And we were able to identify that with Shin Bet, Mossad, and Israel, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But in the West Bank, that was some years ago. So there were some incidences where we had to make some quick, fast decisions. So yeah, I mean, nothing where I would say it was like direct action. I would never attempt to even try to claim anything that I've done comparatively to SEALs or Delta or any of those elite groups.
And so, kind of segueing into, my next question, how does your training through the Secret Service and you go into Texas City ISD in order to protect, the youth of the county that you were in? How does that play into the job role that you took there?
Yeah, Matt, to answer that honestly, I got called in 2018, 72 hours after the Santa Fe shooting, where 2 teachers lost their lives and 8 students lost their lives, and there were 13 additional wounded victims there. Um, and coming from the Secret Service, where we're very proactive and preventative by gathering and collecting information and then analyzing that and then making decisions based upon that, and then doing a very extensive job of doing our due diligence and conducting due diligence in the advanced work process. That's really where the bread and butter of the United States Secret Service is in that, right? Individual tactics are important. Don't get me wrong. Team tactics regarding, the counter assault team, counter snipers, counter surveillance, emergency response team, all those SOD units, very important, play a critical role. But um, for me, what I realized in 2018 is, taking the Santa Fe shooting into consideration, is that that shooter, no need to say his name, uh, exhibited signs and symptoms of pre-attack behavior, just like the Secret Service has taught us to identify for decades. In 1901 is when the Secret Service became a dual purpose agency investigating the world or the nation's currency, but also protecting America's presidents, because you had the assassination of Lincoln. I'm going to ask you a tidbit of information. Do you know what Lincoln's last act of legislation was? This is a trivia question.
Actually, I don't.
You're going to like this. He literally created the United States Secret Service on the day that he was assassinated.
No kidding.
No kidding, right? So for you listeners, that's a little trivia question for you when you're out at a bar or having family night or whatever. But yes, that is true. And so initially they started the Secret Service to thwart counterfeit, because like 2/3 of the nation's money was all counterfeit. So then you had the assassination of Garfield after Lincoln, and then after Garfield in 1901, you had the assassination of McKinley, and that's when they became a dual mission agency. And so since 1901, the Secret Service has been identifying people who wanted to conduct violence against protected individuals. And, I will tell you, I believe that is why we became ranked number 1 in the state of Texas at Texas City ISD, and then number 5 in the nation. I mean, we had all types of notoriety. Wall Street Journal cover. I was on the cover of Security Magazine, is, like I said, the most preventative and proactive security program in the space. But what I'm getting at is, just like in Santa Fe, just like in Parkland, just like in Uvalde, all of these major events. I mean, Appalachia High School shooting in September, just a couple months ago, just 72 hours ago, the tragic shooting in Abundant Life Christian School. I think the issue is that for 30 years or 25 years since Columbine, is America, politicians and administrators have thought that the way to resolve this is to add more officers on campus and to add more weapons to that environment, because they thought it would serve as a deterrent. Or then you get into the conversation of metal detectors and whatnot. What I'm telling you, and what I already know, is through the work that I've done at the Secret Service, through the decades of research from the National Threat Assessment Center, where we are going wrong is we're not observing, identifying, documenting, and intervening in these kids that exhibit these signs and symptoms. And so, why I was so effective was because of that at Texas City. Is we built out behavioral threat assessment teams on every campus. We had multiple means to communicate and report suspicious or concerning behavior. We acted within an exigent manner. We didn't just wait or think that it was somebody else's responsibility. I can recall when I was the director of security, I myself, as the director of security, would be out at kids' houses at 2, 3 a.m. when we would get a report of a kid that was talking about hurting themselves or hurting someone else. That's the level of commitment that we have to have in today's schools because our society dictates that. And I know we'll get to some questions about that later, but just like on Monday in that shooting in Wisconsin, I was on News Nation earlier in the day when the news broke that this was a female shooter, which is very uncommon. And I said then, before the latest developments of yesterday or today, that I am willing to bet that as this thing progresses, that we will see that this kid had a progressive behavior pattern that people knew about, that they didn't report, that there was either a grievance or a series of grievances that she had experienced, whether it be bullying or, bullying regarding perhaps her sexual orientation or gender identity or, some other type of crisis or events that have happened in her life that led to this. I mean, hell, now we're finding out that she, in her social media, had some fascination with the Columbine shooters. Hello, clue number one, that shit's not normal.
Red flag, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, and then you go and it's like after every shooting, the same politicians are like, how do we stop this? Like, oh, well, let's hire more police officers. Okay, the question is this, and all those events that I mentioned earlier, Columbine, Santa Fe, Uvalde, Parkland, Appalachia, though those officers responded, they didn't identify the intentions of that person's heart. They couldn't have stopped that the way that they were. They had to have had prior knowledge that something was happening. And I will tell you, the greatest weapon that we have in this fight is teachers feeling empowered to report, being supported when they do report instead of that stuff being brushed under the rug. Parents and community members all rallying together and reporting the information, and not only reporting it, but ensuring that it's sought out, that it's thoroughly vetted, that there is no stone left unturned. And what I'll tell you is, if you look at the Appalachia shooting in September, kid months and months prior, the year prior, had made threats on Discord, right? Guess what? They send out a police officer on patrol who has zero training in threat identification to go conduct an interview. What's he do? He shows up, he talks to dad. They say they have weapons in the house. They ask the kid if he made these threats on Discord. Guess what? The kid says, no, I didn't make threats. Case closed, moved on. That information was never pushed on to the administration. It was never pushed over to JTTF. It was never pushed over to authorities who could further investigate and get a search warrant for that Discord account to see if he actually said those things that he said. Kid then knows he's scot-free for the next several months. He plans an attack. He gets a weapon. He conceals it. He walks into a school and he kills 4 people. He wounds 9, and it still takes the 2 officers on that campus 8 minutes to identify where the shots are coming from and to apprehend the suspect. So, Texas is one of the states that I have a problem with, and I love the governor here. I love the lieutenant governor, and I'm, I've testified before the Senate multiple times. They're not listening to professionals. I don't consider myself an expert, because I think once you do that, you've gotten an ego that's too big, and you basically are telling everybody you don't need to learn anything else. But what I'm telling you is that we have this fascination that that law enforcement is going to resolve this problem. That just simply can't be further from the truth. If they could have, they would have stopped it on Monday. But guess what? By the time they got there, they responded. They went in the school. She had already killed herself.
And so from what I've read on the incident on Monday is that it may be multiple factors in which was her motive for doing it. Also that in my opinion, when I first heard that she was a female, I'm like, wow, that's pretty much unheard of. And, I definitely wanted to get your take on that and how you feel as though it would even get to that point. Obviously personas between men and women are totally different, female, male, teenagers, young kids. So what are your thoughts on her being a female and it being a rare, would you say rare case?
Well, it's definitely rare when you take into consideration statistics. And I'm going to give a shameless plug to a friend of mine, David Reedman. David has created the K-12 school shooting database, and he tracks these violent events every single day. It's some of the most accurate statistics that you will find. And, what's troubling to me is that prior to my testimony in 2018 before the Texas Senate, where I was called to testify before the Senate regarding mass violence in schools right after the Santa Fe shooting, no one on that Senate panel, they know now, but no one on that Senate panel, when I mentioned the National Threat Assessment Center housed at the United States Secret Service, who investigates and does research on these events to determine behaviors so that we as law enforcement, we as professionals in the space will know what to look for in these behaviors that no one knew about it. And now they know about it because it's, we've seen this progression since 2018. Right. I mean, this is going to go down as one of the deadliest school years ever. I think right now, according to David's statistics, we're like 325 shootings. And David considers shootings on campus also school shootings because they're school shootings.
Right.
Other people classify them different things, but violence is violence. And to get to your question, yes, it is very rare for a female to conduct this particular type of violence. However, what we are seeing is a progression in women now being the suspects and the attackers. If you look at the STEM shooting in Colorado, double shooters, male, female. You look at the Covenant Christian shooting in Nashville, Tennessee last year, female shooter, again, female transitioning to male. There was a grievance there. I still think that something very connected to the LGBTQ community was written in that manifesto, which is why the DOJ has not released that full manifesto. I'm asking President Trump or anybody who hears this that may have a connection, release the manifesto. Let us know what was in the manifesto. Why are we protecting this manifesto? She was a female. Now we have another female. So we're starting to see this progressive behavior. And if you go back and you look at, there was a video that I did, a promotional video with a guy named Eric Endress, who has a product that he does mass communication with. And in that video, I state, because he asked me a similar question, I state that, and you know this, Matt, violence doesn't know any race. It doesn't know a gender. It doesn't know sexual orientation. It doesn't have a place. It can be on a school, it could be on a university, it could be in your workplace, it can be in your church. And so I think we as an American society have a problem understanding that we're not immune from this particular type of violence. That, we live in a middle-class community, we've got great kids, but even our kids can fall victim to influence, and they can fall victim to bullying. They can become, obsessed with a grievance that they need to solve or resolve. Sometimes that's through means of violence. This girl, as the days continue to go by, what we're seeing is that she played her parents to gain access to a weapon. That's another topic I'd like to talk about. To gain access to a weapon, to train her to conduct a violent event that she carried out on Monday. So this was well planned. I'm not surprised at all. I said it Monday on News Nation that, we would see this pattern of behavior in her as the motive and as the investigation continued on. And good luck. Well, I mean, good. Here we are. I was right. And so
sorry. And so one of the things that I've seen is that I don't know if it was her, but I read that someone had posted her manifesto online, but they're considering it more of a letter from someone who knew the shooter. Do you think, in your professional opinion, do you feel that she had a manifesto and we're just waiting to see if it's going to be discovered? Or
I don't know if she actually wrote a manifesto, and we'll find out through the investigation in relation to this one particular event where she's targeting and talking about this plan. But from the preliminary reports, that information that they're considering a manifesto is a letter that she wrote to her boyfriend. And then he's the one who released it. I think that not only will that letter tell us what her intentions were, which it already has, but when they dig a little deeper into her socials, into the dark web, some of those Discord things that, hey, if your kid has Discord, by the way, you probably ought to be looking at what they're looking at. This is not the first time we've dealt with it. In fact, in 2018, the first arrest that we ever made on our campuses, the threat came through on Discord. And luckily there was somebody in that Discord chat that actually called us the next day and told us, this is the person, this is the handle. They told us that they made this threat on your campus. So this is not something new. One of the things that we're completely overlooking is the importance of what we call a digital threat assessment. And there's some people in the space that do it very well. We have some partnerships and connections to people that do that very well at M6 Global Defense, my company. We can conduct those digital threat assessments for you to get a good profile, to look at that. But I think that what we're going to see is that this was a very troubled individual who had a lot of hate in her heart for whatever reasons, felt wronged by society or a group of society, and took it upon herself to carry out violence. And I just don't think people understand how volatile and how fragile American society is. We've got to get better, man.
Would you say that it's a mental health issue or a gun issue?
I think it's a both issue. I get this question all the time. Listen, Matt, you know me, man. Like we're friends outside of this, right?
Right.
Like, that I'm an avid shooter. I'm an avid hunter. I teach tactical classes. I have, a lot of weapons. But I mean, those that want to say that we should have no legislation to secure our weapons, or if we make it accessible to someone who takes that weapon and commits murder or violence with it, that we should have no type of accountability, or it should be minimal accountability, like the state of Texas, for example. And if I made a weapon accessible to a child, okay, or to anybody, and they hurt other people with it, perhaps killed other people with it, it's a misdemeanor. How's that possible? I mean, rule number one, let's take NRA playbook. What's the first rule to owning a weapon? Secure it, right?
Correct.
Point it in a safe direction, know what your backstop is, secure your weapon at all times. That's rule number one broken. So people who are Second Amendment advocates, like myself, I get so frustrated with people who are not even willing to understand the basic principle to owning a weapon is the first thing you should do is secure it at all times. And then if you don't secure it, there should be consequences, especially if someone commits murder with it. People say, oh, well, it still won't won't take away the intent of someone who's intent to do harm. Well, if you don't make it accessible to it, then they're going to have to find another means to do harm.
Right.
So to answer your question, I think we have a both problem in the United States. I think we have a problem in politics where the right doesn't want to give, the left doesn't want to give. Neither party is willing to come in the middle and find a peaceful resolution. You want to know why? Because the majority of these people that are elected to these positions, their kids are going to private school or they're going to some high-end public school. Their kids are not the ones that are dying or carrying out the attacks. and everybody cares until it's time to actually do something that opposes their party's political belief, because then you have private conversations with these people. They feel the same way that I do. Yet they don't have enough balls to actually do what's right for the American people. All of us, Republicans, Democrats, white, black, Asian, Hispanic, gay, straight, they need to start playing nice together for the sake of for the American people, And so, getting into the other space, we absolutely have a mental health crisis in the United States. For anyone to say that we don't is delusional.
I agree.
We have more people on antidepressants than ever before. I'm not afraid to say this myself. 20-something years of a high-stress job, of seeing the worst in people, experiencing things like you and I experienced, Route 91 Harvest Festival, being in high stress, high pressure, high danger environments overseas, other factors in our lives. And then you have that triggering moment, which is scientifically it's data driven and data proven that you have a triggering event that sets you over. For me, what set me over was the loss of my father in 2019, which made me have to go seek therapy because I was having some really, really depressive thoughts. And I myself was on an antidepressant for a while. I'm not anymore. But I think that the problem in America is that we have this stigma to realize that, listen, some things we just can't handle by ourselves. We need help from a professional. We need help from a group of friends, whether that be former veterans or former Secret Service guys, people that we can confide in, whoever it is. We need to normalize the conversation of mental health in America. But if you look at society, like I said, we have more people on antidepressants and under some type of doctor's care for these particular types of behaviors, anxiety, stress, homicidal, suicidal behaviors or ideologies. And we have a society that has no mercy on children. And these kids have, these devices that they use on a day-to-day basis that they cannot get away from, this electronic leash. Back in the days where we went to school, man, like you got bullied at school a little bit, but shit, you know what? You went home and you got a little reprieve. Not anymore, man. These kids are connected to these things. They want to know, who's talking about them, why they're talking about them. They want to constantly defend themselves. And you can't get away from that, man.
Yeah. And not only that, but I think it's, not to say that it's a syndrome, but keeping up with the Joneses. Like, kids want to always have the next best thing. They always want to be as good as the jock or, the most popular kid in school. They want to be able to portray themselves on social media that way so that they're liked. And I think it comes down to a lot of kids, going through social media. They want the likes, they want the clicks, and how we got to this point in society is baffling to me. Just that instance of, I gotta have so many likes. If I don't have this many likes, I'm gonna do this to myself, or I can't proceed with life because of it.
Yeah. Well, they live in a world where acceptance is the end all be all, and, I like to mentor kids. I like to talk to kids, and I would tell you, I tell them all the time, like, whatever you're going through right now, all you need to know, and it doesn't help you right now, but I need you to hear me. It will get better. It will get better. You have to just sustain it. Just outlast it. It will get better. As you evolve as a person, as you get older, you become more mature. You start realizing that the opinions of some of these people that are chastising you, that are harming you verbally,
it's all about what they're dealing with themselves, in their minds, and they're lashing out to other people. And one of the quotes that I always say is, tomorrow is always a new day with new outcomes and new possibilities. You have the way to shape how your tomorrow turns out. Nothing is going to be as hard as today was because you're always going to learn from it.
Yeah. That's great advice, man. You know, I've got an 18-year-old, you've got a 20-year-old, I also have a 20-year-old. Seeing this evolution of these kids, the way that they grow up, having, been responsible for 9,000 kids and now having been in, I don't know, with my company, close to 1,000 schools, I really feel for these kids. They can't escape the pressures that we could escape as kids because of the digital footprint that they have, whether it be, social media in general, texting, Snapchat, all these applications. I said before, we live in a world of likes. That's what these kids thrive on, and it is fantastic. And, as this technology is, I do believe that it does play a role in the mental well-being of American society, especially our kids, but, it goes beyond that. It's way deeper than that. I mean, public school educators, are dealing with, more responsibility now with all the government guidelines, whether they be state guidelines or whether they be federal guidelines on the requirements in which they have to teach these kids, that they're dealing with, the administrative increased demands. They're also dealing with, because of the society in which we're living in, they're dealing with more disciplinary issues than they have ever dealt with. My wife is teaching, this is her 25th year. She has 3 years, 2.5 years left. She's punching out as soon as she hits her time, because schools are not, they're not, I don't want to say this the way that I want to say it, but schools are trying their best to educate American kids, but teachers are dealing with so much more pressure, with the administrative demand, with the stipulations that are set on them on how they can appropriately handle a child that is causing a disciplinary distraction to the other kids in the class. It's a tough job, man. My oldest daughter, she's a junior in college. She's becoming a teacher. And, her mother and I have talked to her about it. Like, look, it's a thankless job, man. It's one of the most important jobs in the world.
And kids can be assholes.
And kids can be assholes. But back in the day when you and I went to school, if you were an asshole to a teacher, there were real consequences. Now it's different. It's not the same.
Yeah.
There are federal guidelines and stipulations that, prevent some kids from being disciplined or handled the way that they should be handled because they've been diagnosed with a learning disability or they have a disciplinary disability, if you can believe that actually exists. And the federal government says that you have to follow such and such guidelines. Back in the day, kid calls you whatever, expletive, or they assault you, your butt's gone. Not anymore.
Yeah.
It's not always like that now.
And back in the day when, you and I were going through school, it was a paddle about this long and about this thick. And if you did something that warranted a spank, they would call your parents and say, hey, this is what your kid did. And your parent either had the choice of saying yes or no, go ahead, paddle them, or the school would just do it.
And they call you afterwards.
And then call you afterwards.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, it's those times have come and gone, my friend.
Oh, yeah.
And, I'll tell you, this is no kidding. I can recall distinctly. I don't know if this guy's still alive or not, but he was a baseball coach. His name was Coach Drake. And I'll never forget it. Lamarck Middle School, 7th grade, me and a bunch of boys, we were jacking around in the gym, not doing what he told us to do. And, I'll never forget, he caught one of the boys messing up, and he made all of us stand on the basketball court, the free throw line.
Mm-hmm.
And he paddled this one kid in front of all of us. And brother, let me tell you, I knew that day there would never be a
That
problem from me.
that
You
that
know,
was that was enough.
oh, dude,
It was enough to instill fear into you as a kid that, hey, look, I don't want that shit happening to me.
no
Like,
way, man.
you know,
No, dude, I saw how he lit that kid up, and I went, nope, I'm never having a problem in here again. You
and
will never catch me making a mistake.
and so as a parent, in as a professional, what is one piece of advice that you would give to parents in order to prepare them for an instance like this, the school shooting, and just not being an asshole? Like,
Yeah.
what advice can you give other parents, just to say, look, this is how your kids should act? And
Well, I think the thing is this, is that parenting has changed. I think even since, I mean, we both have 20-year-olds and an 18-year-old, but I think it's changed. The generation before us is a little bit different also.
mhm,
What I would tell parents is a couple things, right? Like, listen, I know you're tired, right? We all work jobs. You come home, you're tired. Sometimes you just want to zone out. Talk to your kid, man. Talk to them. Find out what's going on in their life. Find out who they're hanging out with, because that often dictates their behavior. Um, I think that things that most people would consider old school, we need to get back to that. For example, one of the things in our house, we don't do it all the time, but we've always tried, and before we just hopped on, I just did it. We've always tried to make it an effort to sit down as a family and eat dinner, right? Sit at the table, eat dinner, have a conversation. How was your day? What's going on? You will know, if you know your child, if something is wrong.
mhm,
And that's your nexus, and that's your in. Have that conversation. Use that time to learn more about your kid, what they're struggling with, right? And if you see these signs and symptoms, don't just brush it off as common, kid behavior. Like, this stuff metastasizes and becomes something could become something very violent, right?
mhm.
And I think the problem is that American society, I mean, I was just in London a couple weeks ago speaking at a conference there, and like, just watching um, the behaviors of, these individuals and these families. It's very different than American society. And I feel like, though they've evolved tremendously as a country, hell, they're older than us, but um, they still value some of that stuff, right?
Mhm.
So I think that America needs to get back to values of the family, right? And having conversations with their kids. Parents, you need to understand, you're the boss. Like, there's some negotiation, but at the end of the day, you make the decisions. That I think I've watched people, having been responsible for 9,000 kids. Like, I've brought parents in and we've had conversations with their kids, and the kids are dictating the conversation and the way that this is going to go. And I just want to go, hey, mom, dad, uh, newsflash,
Like, wake up.
you're the adult in the room. Make adult decisions. This is no bargaining chip. This is no bargaining table. Like, make a decision, And here's the other thing. I can't tell you how many times we had kids that were just blatantly in the wrong, and mom and dad, regardless if they were wrong, doesn't matter how much evidence we had. It could be video camera evidence. It could be written verbal communication from their kid. Not, my kid didn't do that. You're just picking on them. It's like, Jesus, you
Oh
know,
man.
come on, man. Like, here's a video of your kid slapping this other kid and assaulting this kid, and you're chastising us, and you're saying that you're going to sue us because your kid is now in handcuffs because of the assaultive behavior that they provide, or that they participated in. And I usually just disregard that nonsense. But um, you know, I just think, as a parent, we have to get back to the basics of parenting, of making sure that the kid knows that there is a chain of command, that um, you can still love them, but also hold them accountable.
Mhm.
Um, and then having those conversations, man, like I think that is one of the biggest tools a parent can have is just have open, honest conversations. And then I think really the bigger issue is that, yes, you can be an advocate for your kid, but you don't need to be an enabler of your kid. And, at the end of the day, man, like you are the advocate for that child. If something is wrong, if you feel like you're getting lip service from your school district or whoever may be, causing harm to your child, be that advocate for them. We've got to get better at spending time with our kids and understanding them, understanding that there are resources available to help them, understanding that mental health is a serious problem in America, and it's not taboo to seek that. One of the biggest issues I have with mental health conversation is men don't feel like, there's just always been the stigma surrounding it, man. I'll tell you right now, I'm not afraid to say it. It is the best decision that I ever made was to be vulnerable enough with myself to say, okay, I trust in my God. I have a supportive family, but I have to be better, and I have to recognize that something inside me is not right, and go seek that help. It's the best decision I ever made, man. Like I said, I don't take antidepressant. I took a Lexapro for a while with my depression after my dad died, but it's the best decision I ever made in my life, man.
Well, and I think, to caveat onto that is one of the things that everyone needs is a good support channel. If you have a good support channel, it will definitely help propel you to be able to move further into those decisions of, yes, I need help. If you have that good supportive background, family, friends that are there and they're, encouraging you, I think that is one of the best positives that anyone could have in order to, better shape their mental health. I agree wholeheartedly with counseling. Counseling, with an objective counselor is such a stress relief. Being able to, like you said, make yourself vulnerable, being able to discuss with a we'll say partisan party, it's like that individual has no fight in the game and can give you an objective response to how you're feeling, the things that you're seeing versus the things that they're seeing within what you're saying. Like it can turn a person around, 180.
It can. I remember the first session I had with my therapist. I walked out of there. I walked out of there angry, man. She didn't say a word. Like, and then I looked at the clock. I'm like, oh my God, I just gave her 2 hours full of what's bothering me.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked out, but I walked out kind of mad. Like she didn't even ask me really any questions. Like, what's this all about? But then I realized like she was just letting me release. Well,
Yeah.
it's like a steam cooker, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's like a pressure bomb.
Yep.
Dude, if you don't let that pressure out, man, you're going to explode. That's what we're seeing in American society with today's kids carrying out these attacks. You have to let the pressure off. You have to get steam out. If you don't, you are going to self-destruct. I don't care who you are.
Getting steam out in the right ways.
Right.
And I also attribute this to, the box theory. You sit here and you stuff the box full. At some point, the lid is going to pop off. Whereas if you throw some stuff in the box and then you open the box here and there and you take out the things in the box, it will not, you won't get that pressure cooker effect.
Yeah. It's the pressure cooker effect. That's what we're seeing in the United States. In fact, I'm going to use that, the pressure cooker effect.
I
It's true, man.
appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that little
Oh,
tidbit. But
and so kind of, staying in the mental health arena here, what would you say our decline has been in mental health as far as us as a country? Would you say it's family time that has been the ultimate decline, or are there other contributing factors that you would say that are the decline in the United States?
man, I think that we could write a list this long
Mm-hmm.
of problems, but I would tell you, I truly believe that the traditional family unit um, decline started in the 70s and the 80s when we saw moms and dads um, instead of trying to sit and work through problems. And listen, I want to be abundantly clear. I would never encourage anybody to stay in an abusive relationship, because I've said this before, and I've had people say, "Well, Mike, what about an abusive relationship?" I never encourage that. Like, if someone's being physically abused, obviously do
Get
whatever you
out.
need to do to get out of the situation.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that it was almost like in the 70s, and I'm a victim of divorce. And when I say victim, what I'm saying is that some of these things that I had to go have conversations with this therapist about were hidden traumas when I was a kid that I never addressed. And it was in those conversations and those 2-hour vet sessions where all this crap came out, right? But what I'll tell you is if you look back historically, I think that the degradation of American society started in the 70s and the 80s, when instead of trying to work through marital disagreements, they just started a divorce. Well, let's just get a divorce. I don't want to be with you anymore. Like, people don't take that vow of marriage serious
Mm-hmm.
anymore. And I think it started there. And then if you evolve from the 70s and the 80s, you had this influx of divorce. And then in the 90s and in the early 2000s, you saw this evolution of, prior to social media, you had um, what we call reality TV, which was not very realistic, where you had individuals that were on reality TV that were performing for the camera um, in ways that would not make themselves or their families proud and the people that they represent. And I think that American youth started to think that this behavior was normal. And then now you get into, mid 2000s to present day, where you have social media, and social media has caused kids to behave, or even adults to behave in ways that they have never behaved before, things that were never socially acceptable. They participate in things that would never be said to a person's face for fear of losing their teeth. Um, they say it because there's comfort behind that screen, that
Mm-hmm.
there's no consequences, there's no accountability, there's no instant trauma or fear of getting punched in the mouth if you, um, for example, let's say you offend someone's wife. Um, there's no fear of that if you say it online. And so I think that the boundary of what's acceptable over the last 3 to 4 decades has consistently just moved back, and back, where we
Mm-hmm.
are living in a society where, everything is basically permitted, and these kids don't understand that. Their brains are not capable enough, and they're not developed enough to understand that there are serious consequences to behaviors. I'm proud to be a Gen Xer. You know, I truly believe that if all hell broke loose, it's going to be Gen X that saves the world. Uh, I mean, we grew up on garden hose water and staying outside till the lights came on and being locked out.
Yep.
there was crap that we did in today's world. One, you can't even get the kids off the damn couch or out from behind the screen, whether it be a phone or a video game. That's another thing. Violent video games. We've created this acceptable behavior through violent video
Mhm.
games. Well, I mean, even if you look at like horror movies when we were kids, they were pretty few and far between. And I wouldn't say that they were appropriate, but they were, compared to today, they were somewhat appropriate. Who
Yeah.
Friday the 13th, Freddy Krueger, you know, were they somewhat traumatic, scary movie? Yeah. But some of these movies that are coming out now are just like, holy hell, this is like, who thought of it? Like, whoever thought of
Right.
this has a very warped mind, right?
Exactly.
And these kids don't know what's acceptable and what's not acceptable anymore, Matt.
No, I agree. And it would you say that, and kind of to segue into the next question, would you say that it's all of this in your experience that has prompted you to start M6 Global? And what made you want to branch out and do your own thing?
Well, I think, I started M6 Global because I realized in 2018 and 2019 that, one, we can't depend solely upon our federal or state governments to do what's right. Um, that's the first thing. The second thing is that, having worked in education, and listen, we're not solely in education. I mean, we've done nuclear power plants. We've done massive, in fact, the largest concrete tilt wall panel building in the United States is one of our clients. They're a massive company, 4.1 million square foot facility. So we're not bound to just schools, but that's where my passion is because I know how vulnerable our society and our kids are. I also have a wife that's a teacher. I have a daughter that's going to be a teacher. I want to create a safer space for both of them and for generations after them. Um, I want to make sure that kids can go to school every day knowing that they're learning what's going to pivot them to the next level in society in a safe space. I want to make sure that one of the things that no one talks about is the mental health and well-being of the staff who are teaching America's kids. I want to make sure that they know when they go to school that they're safe, that they have a support system. And so that's why I'm so passionate about K-12. But primarily what I want to do is I want to educate people on and tell people this is something that we can resolve. We're not going to stop everything, and I will never say 100% you can stop every single one of these. I mean, hell, my buddy Tim Reveille, who's left the Secret Service, he retired. He's now a director of security in Missouri. Him and I work together literally daily. We do presentations throughout the United States on pre-attack behavior, assassinations. Anybody who's interested, let us know. We'll come out and speak. But one of the things that we talk about is that, the United States Secret Service is the absolute best, regardless of the failures on July 13th. I don't even consider the September 15th secondary assassination attempt an attempt because there was no shots fired by the assailant. There's a whole lot of other things there. But what Tim and I always talk about is that there's been 43 documented assassinations on protectees of the United States since 1901. Okay. That's documented. What you don't hear about are the thousands and thousands, over 7,000 that have been thwarted by the men and women of the United States Secret Service. And so what I'm doing at M6 Global, which separates what we do, is, one, we have a network of individuals just like myself. No, I don't advertise them. You don't need to know who they are. Once we're under contract, then you'll see the level of talent that we have. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we can prevent this stuff if you're paying attention, if you're observant, if you identify, if you intervene, and then you sustain and provide services to those individuals, and you get them off that pathway to violence. This is research driven and proven. There's always signs and symptoms of that behavior, man. even in Stephen Paddock's case in Mandalay Bay, which you and I both worked,
Mm-hmm.
no, we didn't really establish a motive yet that we know of. But what we do know is that Paddock's behavior prior to that event would lead most people to believe that there was something suspicious or something going on in his life.
Right.
So, that's what we do at M6 Global is we work with companies, we work with schools, we come in, we conduct a series of surveys because we want to know how everyone feels, not just the people who make the decisions. Then we come in and we do a long series of very thorough interviews with your stakeholders, gather information, and then we go boots on the ground and we look at the sites ourselves. We collect that information and then we provide very detailed and strategic support to you in building out a strategic plan and what I call the 3 F's. That's the foundation, that's the framework, that's the finishes. And I always tell people this. The problem with the K-12 security industry, just like in Texas, a couple of years ago, they pushed HB3 through, which says that, hey, we're going to put an officer on every campus. Okay. That was a mandate. Well, guess what? You don't have to comply with it if you don't have the funds, right? So you have an exemption letter. You write a letter saying we can't afford it. You send it to the state. They go, okay. But we're sitting on a $22 billion surplus. Yet you're telling me you don't have the money to provide an officer on every campus. But here's the thing. I wouldn't say that would be the first priority. The people that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, these are educators, man. They don't have the understanding of how to prevent this stuff or even build a strategic plan. They have no roadmap to success. That's what we do. We build it in the foundation, the framework, and the finishes. You can't put an officer on a campus or you can't have a metal detector, which was what I would consider your finish, before you have a foundational framework of having a plan, having a trained and empowered staff, having behavioral threat assessment teams, having counselor to student ratios that are proportionate, having open communication with your staff, your students, and guess what? Your parents and your community and your stakeholders. Those are the foundational pieces. I always tell people, you can't hang crown molding, which is a finish, on a wall, which will be your framework, that doesn't have a foundation underneath it. You're a carpenter, you have to have a strong foundation. This is not something that's rocket science, right? But the problem is that the secret is out, Matt. The secret is out. This industry is a $3 billion annual industry, the K-12 security market. So people are capitalizing on trying to sell products instead of solutions that are data-driven, that have been researched for 40 freaking years and have been proven to work. We want to skip over all that hard work, right? Because it's hard work. The other problem is people start talking about the nasty P word. And I remember having a conversation with a senator about 2 years ago. Well, it was actually, I'll tell you when it was. It was right after Uvalde. Before my testimony on Uvalde, I met with this one senator in his office and he says, Mike, man, how do we stop this? I said, sir, respectfully, I'll tell you today, 3 years after the Santa Fe shooting, 3 years after my multiple testimonies, we can stop this. You've got to stop thinking that law enforcement can resolve it. They are responsive in nature. We have to take the fight proactively. He says, what do you mean? I said, everything that you need to know about the next kid that's going to commit suicide, which, by the way, you have a higher rate of suicide rather than homicide, which active shooter is the lowest statistic to happen. You can prevent it if you just research and analyze the data. He says, what do you mean? I said, the data that the schools report to you on a regular basis, you can establish patterns of behavior in these kids if you're analyzing it. He says, what do you mean? I said, it's been statistically proven time and time and time again that there's a correlation between attendance rating, between academic decline, between discipline increase, in reclusiveness, all of these things that we can start tracking this data and show which kids are on this pathway to violence. And he goes, well, here's the problem. But Mike, isn't that profiling? And aren't you afraid that, we're going to have like the ACLU and all these other people come out and say that you're profiling kids? I was like, who cares? Like, we're profiling behavior, sir, respectfully.
Exactly.
We're not profiling a kid's sexual orientation or ethnicity. We're not profiling that. In fact, I don't even care to know that. I want to be able to analyze that data. And here's the deal, Matt. I got tired of waiting on these son of a guns. So, me and my team, we've created a software that does all this stuff. And this is not a selling point, but for a year, we've been working on it. And it's a full case management software. We've built in mental health. You can talk to a clinician, a child psychologist, schedule that appointment. That comes out in the next 3 weeks. We've been working on it for a year.
That's amazing.
It's awesome, man. We've got some of the best in the business that have worked on this software because I got tired of waiting on governments to do it because they're just not. It's like they passed the mandate. Oh, well, we got an officer on every campus. No, you don't.
Well,
You have a bill that says that, but you don't have an officer on every campus.
And I think a lot of that also comes down to the next campaign season as well. They want to sit on things and not be proactive in implementing them because that's something in their future that, hey, I can run on this again, and attempt to try and facilitate it next term. But it seems like it's always that vicious circle of never ending, hey, I'm going to do this, but it never gets fulfilled.
Yeah. I say it all the time, you probably know, I know you know this, like I have political aspirations, because I truly do believe that one person can make a difference. And I can tell you, I've had so many people say, Mike, you're just one person. I don't care. I don't care. I die knowing that I fought a good, hard fight, sorry, go ahead.
Well, and like you said, you're just one person, but you're one person that can influence one person who that person now influences another person or two people. It's, the ball of yarn effect, if you will.
Brother, a fire doesn't start with a flame. It starts with a spark.
Exactly.
And if I've got to be that spark, I'll be that spark because I'm not giving up on this fight, man. And I will say it. I really don't think that there's anybody as passionate as I in this fight. And some people may disagree, and that's fine. And there's a hell of a lot of troopers out there that are in this fight with me. But my passion, I think, is what separates me, and that sometimes is also it's also my detriment to my detriment.
Right.
But it's like I said, man, it's a flame doesn't start, or a fire doesn't start with a flame. It starts with a spark, man. And so we've got to band together. We got to stop trying to be individuals in this space, man. Like companies, individuals, we've got to band together. We've got to start talking real facts, man. And it's like the whole gun conversation we had earlier. Listen, guys, no one is coming for your freaking guns, man. Like if the Obama administration did not take your guns, no one's taking them, especially under this president. Like calm down, right? Stop falling into the political rhetoric, right? And the political grandstanding and just think reality based, right? Like no one's coming for your guns, man. Like, and if you own a gun, be a responsible gun owner, hide them, secure them, keep them away from your kids, man. Like we all think that, oh, not my kid. Listen, it can be your kid. There's been multiple shooters whose parents thought it couldn't be their kid too, right? Or not only kids, but man, we don't even talk about workplace violence, which is a higher statistic,
right?
People who have crisis events that affect their money and their livelihood and their family, who have access to weapons, who are adults. That's why the statistics higher in workplaces. I've sat across from many administrators or executives in companies, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we're good. We don't have that type of problem here." Okay.
Yep. And until you fire that one person or you cause a disciplinary, you implement a disciplinary action into that one individual, and then that just sets them off from there.
Well, it doesn't even have to be anything that's generated from a company. It could be, an employee that's going through a divorce, whose husband or wife, knows where they are, when they're going to be there, and they know that they can carry out that attack. And guess what? I'm going to do it, and I'm going to take out as many people as I can. Listen, one of the things that affected me, and I don't talk about this much, is in 2020, 2020, we had a beautiful, vibrant principal on one of our elementary campuses who everyone loved. No need to say her name. She lived literally about 5 minutes from where I'm sitting right now. Going through divorce. We knew that she was going through a divorce. We knew that we didn't know all the details, but we knew that there was some allegations of abuse, physical abuse. At the time, and I stand firm on this, at the time I used a facial recognition software at the time it was called AnyVision. It's now called Usto. Not a plug for Usto, but it's the truth. It's one of the most effective softwares I ever used. We knew that they were going through a divorce and there was a stay away order, and we put the husband's photo that we pulled off social media into the system so that if he, tried to make his way onto our campus, we would get a notification. I truly believe that is why he never came to our campuses, is because he knew that we would identify him as soon as he stepped out of the car. But do you know that as the divorce went on, the day of the divorce, the day it was finalized, he went to the house. She was packing her car with the kids in the car seats. And he showed up. They got into a verbal altercation. He pulled out a pistol, shot her right there in the threshold of her car door. She attempted to run, and he killed her right there in the yard. And so I always chuckle but it's not funny when you sit across from superintendents and school board members or parents or business executives who think that it can't happen to them, that they're immune. Just a week and a half ago, Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare, was assassinated by someone with a grievance. And guess what? Before the motive came out, I said publicly, yeah, this is a grievance. This is going to be someone who has some type of issue with wealth or with the healthcare industry, or they had a loved one that was, denied service or coverage. This is what this is going to be about, right? And as that thing developed, also what we've learned is that his wife said that they knew that he had some type of threats against him, and so shame on United Healthcare and their board for not providing some type of protection. I had this conversation with a former colleague of mine. I'm part of an advisory board called Total Executive. It's a company called Total Executive Security. And I was having a conversation with the CEO, good friend of mine, Eric Rasmussen, today about a possible client that reached out to me today that needs executive protection. So I'm facilitating that. And I was talking to him about it. And I said, Eric, what these people in these executive roles need to understand is that, with that type of profit, they can afford our level of protection. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a full counter assault team. It doesn't need to be a full executive protection team. You are in executive protection. You still do executive protection. Matt, you and I both know that the fight is won in the advanced work.
Exactly. And so on the last episode, you and I both know Jay Collins. We've worked with Jay Collins, and advance is our bread and butter. Advance is, we have to get it right 1,000 times a day. They only have to get it right
once. Yep. I always say that. I tell people all the time is that the attacker always has the upper hand, right? We can't dictate when it happens. And so, I was talking to Eric today, and I told Eric, I said, what possibly could have saved Brian Thompson's life is that communication have occurred, that he was receiving some type of unusual or concerning behavior from someone or a group of people, and the company doing the right thing of just, you don't even need an armed individual, right?
Right.
But just an individual who can conduct in advance, who can say, well, sir, madam, I think what we need to do is, instead of putting you at the hotel down the street and having you walk across the street, down the path into the hotel, where this is a public
Mm-hmm.
event, everybody knows that this is a somewhat a publicly advertised event, that all these executives are going to be here. I think what we should do is, let's put you in the hotel. Let's take away that risk of walking across the street, down the road, into the front door. Or maybe we keep you in that hotel off site, but we have a driver for you
Mm-hmm.
who, when you get out, he's going to cover your 6 o'clock, or she's going to cover your 6 o'clock. And we're going to take a secondary entrance through a
Right.
side door, through the back door, so that you're not being drawn to the front. It could have been something as simple as that. For $1,000 for that day, or $1,500 or $2,000, whatever the going rate is, that could have been the difference between the life and death of Brian Thompson.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's always mind-boggling to me, man, and it is so frustrating to hear people say, we don't have those kind of kids, we don't have those kind of problems. Listen, again, violence knows no race, it knows no boundaries, it knows no ethnicities, it doesn't have a place. It can be in a church, it can be in a hotel, it can be in your home, it can be in your schools, it can be in, on the sidewalk, just like it
Yep.
was with Brian Thompson. So you've got to be situationally aware of your own surroundings. And then if you're in a position monetarily and you're a person of high net worth value, you have to protect yourself, man.
Exactly.
So I don't know, man. We live in a
So
crazy world, brother.
that we do. So on every episode, I always have a different bottle of additive-free tequila. I know that you don't drink anymore, or very seldom. If you do, special occasions and things like that. Are you comfortable with talking about why you don't drink anymore?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was never a big drink. I honestly can tell you that I've never had a drink, even the high end stuff. I mean, I've had Pappy Van Winkle, I've had, Blanton's, I've had, if I had to choose one of my favorite bourbons, it's going to be William LaRue Weller. Um, it did taste pretty good, but I wasn't to the point for, at $100 a shot or $150 a shot, where I was like, or a pour, then I'm like, hey, I need another one of those,
Right.
But so I was never a big drinker. I will occasionally have a drink um, for a special occasion. And let me tell you 2 special occasions over the last year. The only 2 times I've drank. Every year I host a United States Secret Service Counter Assault Team Special Operations Division amongst some of my closest former teammates. We've been doing that. This is the 10th year.
Nice.
So I had a drink this year with some of my former colleagues and teammates. One drink, just commemorative, pretty much, and symbolic, and that was it. The other time that I had a drink this year was with a very special lady who my company is partners with her 501c3 nonprofit foundation, and that's Michelle Gay with Safe and Sound Schools. Her daughter was brutally murdered at the Sandy Hook shooting. We've
Oh wow.
become very good friends. And as part of our partnership, we host them and their administrative team at the ranch here in Texas. And as a gift, as a sign of appreciation, she bought a bottle of bourbon, not knowing that I don't drink anymore. And it was like a maple bourbon. And her and I we had a drink together. So I just, one, I never really cared for it. As I get older, not that I drink in excess, but I don't like the way it makes me feel the next day. but really the real reason is that I grew up with some very special people that live across the street from me. And this was, it's crazy because like i- I'm a kid of the 70s, right?
Mhm.
1977. Grew up in the 80s, so we're not too far removed from the civil rights movement. I mean, 1968, we talk about the assassination of Kennedy and Medgar Evers and MLK and all these individuals. Um, and one of my closest friends, African American family, moved in across the street from me in 1981, and they had two boys, and they're like my brothers. And this is kind of emotional, man. But they in 2014, the younger brother, who was like the little brother to all of us boys on the street, who had a whole group of boys, he passed away unexpectedly. And his older brother, who was my age, who was one of my closest friends growing up, um, this kid was probably one of the most talented athletes I've ever met in my life. Uh, I always wanted to be him athletically. He was phenomenal, and he was a good person. I'll never forget his smile, his laugh. But he started drinking in college, and I don't think anybody really knew that it became a problem until later on. And he passed away last year of
Okay.
cirrhosis. And, 2014, after his younger brother passed, I think he really kind of nosedived and really leaned on the bottle a lot. And he did a very good job of hiding it from all of us for a very long time until it was too late. And so, I was fortunate enough that in his final weeks, I was able to spend a heck of a lot of time with him, being a business owner, having flexibility in my schedule. Um, I'll never forget a couple of days before he passed away. I mean, this man was a tremendous athlete. He would pretty much dwindle down to maybe 100 pounds. And me and him and one of our other closest friends sat in the hospital bed, and we had probably the best 2.5, 3 hour conversation that we've had in decades. And I knew then that he wasn't going to make it, because they always say, like, when people know that they're passing, like, weird things happen. He was recalling things from our childhood that I forgot. I mean, and it wasn't until that conversation that I was like, oh my God. I mean, and we laughed and we cut up, but
Mhm.
long story short, he passed away. And I loved him like a brother. I love his parents like my parents. And, I walked away from that event asking myself, like, do I really, do I really enjoy drinking? And the answer was no. Or do I just do it socially to fit in? And the answer was yes. And I walked away from that just telling myself that unless it's a very special event, that I just don't really want to participate in it. And I don't judge anybody who does. It's just, for me, it's not something I enjoy, man. I just don't. I don't enjoy it. I had a conversation. This is so funny, and my wife still thinks it's hilarious, right? Um, but my wife and I were having a conversation at the ranch here a while back, and I got some buddies that, I love them to death. They're my closest friends, but when we get to the ranch, it's like, hey, wake up in the morning, we're having a Bloody Mary or a mimosa, and then we're moving to beer from, like, 11 a.m. till 6, and then from 6 we're drinking red wine or we're drinking, bourbon. And I watch some of these guys; they'll drink, like, I don't know, 20 beers in a day. And I told my wife the other day, I'm like, think about it. Like, I'm not that thirsty, right? Like, I'm not that thirsty. Like, just to be beer after beer after beer after
Yeah.
beer. Like, you wouldn't do that with, I mean, couldn't sit here and drink 20 of these, right?
I
So it's
mean,
like,
even if you tried, like, you'd be overhydrated and you'd be peeing all the
oh,
time, for sure. Uh,
dude, she's like, because the way I said it, I was like, I'm not that thirsty. And she was like, and she started laughing. She thought it was the funniest thing ever. But she's like, you know what, Mike, you're right. She's like, how do you drink that much how do you drink that much fluid, regardless if it's alcohol or not? Like, how do you do that?
yeah.
And so I mean, I love watching it, because I sit back and just go, hell, I got, this is like a Olympic sport or something,
Right.
So,
Well,
yeah, that's the story, man.
Well, Mike, I do appreciate you coming on to the podcast. I appreciate you sharing your story. I appreciate your views on mental health and where, our decline is as a country and, how we can actually help America, become normalize mental health. And, you're a very good friend of mine. I appreciate, your views, and I appreciate, you coming on. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome, man. Anytime. Look, brother, I value and honor you as a friend. Thank you for having me. Anytime there's any topics you want to talk about, I'd be happy to talk about any of them. I value your commitment to our country and your service to our country. Maybe next time we'll talk about like me running for U.S. Congress or something. That would be fantastic.
Oh, if and when you do decide to run, I want to be your first interview.
Down. Let's do it. You called it. You got it. No doubt.
Perfect. Thank you everyone for joining in. If you like this podcast and want more great content, hit the like and subscribe button. And as always, know what's in your glass.
All right.
Thanks, Mike.
Yep. You're welcome.